Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Live at 5. I just wanted to welcome you guys as Taylor Butler. I am here, your host today. No, by now you may realize that I am not PGD. No, I am not Pastor Greg Drumwright. But he has so graciously allowed me to sit in this seat. That's a lot of pressure. I'm going to try to do the best that I can on today. Y'all bear with me. All right? Let me just tell you something. Last week, we had a beautiful panel speak on I Can't Breathe, Part 1. They brought out some things about education and health. But this week, we're going to bring in I Can't Breathe, Part 2. All right? We got a little video, a little intro video, that's going to bring you into what's going on. Go ahead and check this out.
Slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction.
Had any idea that I'd ever be a slave again? I'd take a gun and just end it all right away.
And then they came back not too long ago. So they've been here back at the Capitol for probably about 30 minutes.
Ever since 401 years ago, the reason we could never be who we wanted and dreamed to be in is you kept your knee on our neck.
I think our criminal justice system is working as intended. It is only broken to the extent that our society is broken.
2 years after the gang beating, this video shows Browder being slammed to the ground, his head smashed.
Done dying and complaining about the problems, we want to stand up, because the other side of being done dying is knowing that when we fight, we win.
Breaking now at 11, outrage spilling into the streets. Fires set, 2 police officers shot as protesters in Louisville and around the country unleash their anger.
They're not interested in black lives. They're interested in props. A small number of blacks who were killed by police during conflict with police.
It's time for us to stand up in George's name and say, get your knee off our necks. But I'm more hopeful today than ever.
Our investigation found that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in their use of force after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker.
Wow. We just want to apologize for the technical difficulties going on during that video, but it was still a powerful video. I think we're going to unpack the 13th Amendment here with our beautiful brother, Christopher Goldman, who has so much information for us. What you got?
Yes, ma'am. How are you doing today? So I think the first thing I want to do is talk about what the 13th Amendment is. So this amendment was created to solidify the works that the Emancipation Proclamation had already started. Right. The proclamation wasn't a true act of legal standing. It could be reversed by any president. So the 13th Amendment was a work to get that ratified into our Constitution. It was passed December 31st, 1864, going to January 1st, 1865, and ratified by all states in December 18th, 1865, I'm sorry. And so this, again, was a work to abolish slavery at an official level. It passed through Senate, but it got stalled at the House of Representatives. At that time, there were a party that were they were against slavery, but they weren't necessarily for equalizing black people. And so there's a clause, as you may have seen at the beginning of the video, that said, except for that slavery would be abolished except for a crime as a punishment. This is called the exception clause.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, you said a few things in there I don't think I really knew about. So how can we really connect that to what's going on?
Well, so it's actually very interesting that you asked that, because the 13th Amendment, what I believe, is one of the supporting system of racial injustice these days. It laid the groundwork for a lot of different things that has happened to black people in the upcoming year. I mean, in the past decades. And so what it basically did was allowed criminal labor. It allowed convict leasing.
Wow.
And so what that is criminals that go to jail or who are convicted and are in jail can now be leased out, or could have been leased out to private sectors, to state contracts, in order to work at either low to no payment.
Wow. So that speaks to some of the high incarceration rates, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Definitely. I mean,
oh man.
These people were being convicted for things like loitering and vagrancy. Loitering is just standing around, looking aimless. Vagrancy is homelessness. So you think about it, you have hundreds of thousands of slaves who are just recently free. They don't have anywhere else to go. So what these states would do, or what these how it actually started with slave patrols, with no slaves, they were formed into they were the genesis of police departments in the South.
Wow. And
they would round out and look at different ways to enforce what we call black codes, Jim Crow laws. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Yeah.
That's well known. They would round up these people who would be charged with petty crimes and reintroduce them to to a legal form of slavery, slave labor. For example, Sugar Land, Texas.
Wow.
You're from Texas.
I am from Sugar Land, isn't it?
Oh, you're from Sugar Land.
Well, Sugar Land's right outside of Houston, so yeah, I'm right in there.
So you already know. So perhaps you didn't know, but from the time that the slave labor was instituted and rising, there was about 3,500 slaves from, I believe, 1866 to 1912. Let me fact check that right quick. Yep, 1866 to 1912 that were killed working, or who died working slave labor through the prisoner system in Sugar Land, Texas.
In sugarcane, that's why they call it Sugar Land. Man, oh man.
This actually caused them to outlaw it in Texas. That's how brutal the system was. And as we see now, it's still laid some groundworks for what's happening today. In fact, some of these systems still exist. Here recently, out in California, there were, I believe in 2015, there was a case in where these prisoners were volunteered as firefighters, and they were getting paid $2 a day if they were in camp, and $1 per hour if they were fighting fires. So these are like drastically low wages, and that's how modern slavery works today. Whereas the states won't allow you to, or allow the systems to not pay the workers, but they'll just pay them really low. Yeah.
Well, you just dropped a bomb on modern slavery going on. If we didn't know it was still happening, we just got insight from you, Christopher. So we appreciate that, and you come and talk to me about my hometown. I don't know how I feel about that, but anyway, we're going to go ahead and show something different to continue this conversation going. Criminal justice. Watch this next video.
Law enforcement in the United States, thanks largely to the war on drugs, routinely targets people of color, often living in ghetto areas, for stops and searches, typically in a futile effort to find drugs. The problem that we face as civil rights lawyers and advocates is that it's extremely difficult to prove race discrimination, because the Supreme Court, has required that you offer evidence of conscious racial bias, some kind of admission in order to even get in the courthouse door. So that's why we don't see so many cases involving racial bias in the criminal justice system. The single most important thing we can do to eliminate racial bias in the criminal justice system today is to end the war on drugs. The drug war is responsible for the arrest, incarceration, and branding of millions of people of color as felons, relegating them to a permanent second-class status for life. Drug use, abuse, as well as drug dealing is just as prevalent in white communities as it is in poor communities of color. But the drug war has been waged almost exclusively in ghetto communities, resulting in what I believe is a racial undercast, an enormous population of black and brown folks who are poor, who've been labeled felons for engaging in precisely the same kind of behavior, illegal drug activity, that goes ignored in middle-class white communities.
Well, that beautiful sister was Michelle Alexander, the author of The New Jim Crow, and she was bringing out some beautiful points about how the same things that happen in other communities, not just minority communities, not just African-American communities, happen everywhere, but how it's maximizing our communities to shed us in a bad light. So we have Eric here, another great brother, that's going to sit here and speak to that. Tell us what we're talking about.
How you doing, first and foremost?
How you doing?
Doing good. Texas.
Oh, he did shout out Texas one time. Texas folk. All right.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to speak on in regards to criminal justice system, pretty much what we've been dealing with for over the past several years almost, is it rigged or is it racist?
Right.
Or is it both? One of my biggest concerns is, as the criminal justice system, folks, people need to realize the term criminal justice system, it is brought up into three subsystems: police, courts, and corrections. That means law enforcement, the courts, and the correctional facilities that are pretty much held here in America. So that's one of the biggest things we have to really look into as far as how the system is set up. And not only that, the criminal system, it is a interdependent, not independent, interdependent, which basically means in terms, it needs a dependence for two or more people to have dependence on each other for something to come together. Say, for example, if a person goes to jail for something like that, the police, they have to get involved. Obviously, their Miranda rights, get them arrested, get them in the system. The courts, obviously a court date, things of that nature. And if found guilty of something, that's when the corrections, AKA the police, not the police, but the jail system comes into play.
Got you. Okay. All right. So when it comes to the courts, it's so interesting because I was reading something on courts. And it comes to the criminal justice system and courts. It seems as though a lot of the laws and everything that goes along and around criminal justice, it goes straight up against us. Kind of like our brother was talking about mass incarceration. It works so that we can be, processed into it, and then you just have no way of coming back out. And if you come back out, you have this stain on you now that will continue to keep you going through this system. Can you speak to something?
Well, not only that, these are the three biggest things that we have in African Americans. Mass incarceration, miseducation, and police genocide.
Wow.
Mass incarceration, miseducation, and police genocide. Those three things are pretty much the backbones of what we struggle with in Black America. Obviously, one of the biggest things we construct on is, like the woman was saying on the video, as far as coming from a background, not having necessarily needs to survive, what are you going to result to as African American, male, perhaps, trying to provide for their family, can't get a good, welling job, doesn't have the right education to get a job, will find any means necessary to provide for their family. Because like she was saying, drugs, wars, things of that nature, selling drugs, going out on the streets. This is what most African, not all African Americans, but this is all we know.
Right.
And this is all we can relate to, how to provide for our family. But it's misused in certain ways, because if you really look at the African Americans and look at the whites of America, they don't get the same treatment, which is awfully true.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It takes the words out of your mouth, because when you truly realize the things that she's talking about, she's literally saying in there, you're not the problem. You were made the problem. And that's really what everything is just speaking to that we're talking about. Thank you so much, Eric. I truly appreciate that, man. That's heavy, because I have some family members back that had to go through some things and they were good, but because the system started and they could never get out, life was over.
And it's not really their fault too, neither.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. But how do you tell a young black man, it's not your fault when that's all they see and that's all they're made out to be, and that's the issue. All right. So from the criminal justice standpoint to sedition, we're going to go ahead and watch a video on sedition. That's what's next.
CBS News has confirmed Attorney General Bill Barr is encouraging U.S. attorneys nationwide to seek federal charges against violent protesters, even when state charges could apply. The Wall Street Journal was the first to break this story. In a call last week, Barr reportedly suggested federal prosecutors consider charging demonstrators with sedition, a rarely used law that is only levied when someone is suspected of attempting to overthrow the government.
In one of the few successful times this was used was back in the 90s. If you remember the blind sheik that was convicted of a plot to blow up the World Trade Center. In that case, he was convicted of a seditious conspiracy.
Well, in case you are like me, my pastor taught me not to be ignorant. He has taught our church not to be ignorant, and I did not know exactly what sedition was. So I'm so glad to have Dr. Thomas. We call her Dr. Thomas. Dr. Thomas, Tanisha Thomas, oh my God, full of education. She's coming to explain to us in layman's terms, people terms, what's going on with sedition. Let us know.
Well, for those who don't know, sedition is a tool that they came up with after World War II. And what sedition is when they charge people for coming against something that's wrong within the government. So coming against the state or the monarchy and publicizing it. So when you think about this, and when you see that video, a lot of people didn't realize how egregious what Attorney General William Barr did, or what he said is. Because when you look at it, sedition is actually a tool that you could use for voter disenfranchisement. Because if you think about it, and if you do some research, what we find out is that sedition is a felony.
Right.
And you could go to prison for 20 years.
Wow.
If convicted.
If convicted.
Yes.
That's a big if?
Yes.
Big if. Okay, so who exactly does sedition impact? So what do you mean?
Well, historically speaking, sedition isn't something that we typically see used in the courts. So that's why when Attorney General William Barr, when he advised the prosecutors to charge the protesters with sedition, they were kind of confused because there's not many cases where we have actually tried sedition, because sedition is like treason's little brother. So it's like, what do? We don't have a pattern for this. And the only case where they actually charged someone with sedition was after 9/11. Was in the 1990s, approaching 9/11, to bomb one of the World Trade Centers. So if that is the case, so now black people standing up in America is being equated to 9/11, the most tragic day in American history.
Wow. So basically that's trying to put, minorities and African American people, like you said, on the same level as a foreigner coming into a terrorist, essentially. A terrorist is what you're saying. We're being called terrorists, is what you're explaining to us. Wow. And so what do you do when something like that is going on in the system? Like, how can you educate yourself to go up against stuff like that?
Well, one thing you can do is you can vote. And we all know that there's an election coming up on November 3rd.
Is there?
Yes, there is. So make sure you vote. You have to vote this year. It's not something that's an option. It's not a choice. We just lost Justice Ruth Ginsburg, and she was the last hope for the Supreme Court.
Right.
So now we have to vote, because we have this attack coming against us, calling us felons for standing up for our rights to be seen as humans in the United States. That's not right. And voting is the tool that we have that's coming up and that will be the most effective.
Well, I'm glad that you brought out voting, because that's something we're going to say very often at some point, you know. Vote, vote, vote. If you haven't heard it today, you hear it now, vote. But just throwing in there, just a tidbit, just letting you know, a lot to have to do with that is common law. Common law is really a judge-made law. And it is something that, you know, when you vote and you go and vote, you can vote for judges who can go out there and help make a difference. And speaking of that, the I Am Change March to the Polls will help you to go out and find the information on the judges, information on the different people that you need to be voting for. Do not be ignorant at the polls. Make sure you go to www.justiceforthenextgeneration.org. That's J4TNG.org to get more information on that I Am Change March to the Polls, so that you can go there educated and you can vote, so that we can change what happens when people try to use sedition against us as a minority, or try to use common law as a basis that's not even really a law. So we have the power to do some change here, but it's gonna take some work, like walking and voting. So thank you so much, Dr. Thomas, with all your education and your mindset. Girl, you the bomb. I don't know if anybody told you. All right, we have another video for y'all to go ahead and see. Check this one out. We hope you've been following Breonna Taylor's case and everything that's been going on with it. So this is going to go ahead and pull you up to speed in case you missed it on the news.
After hearing the evidence from our team of prosecutors, the grand jury voted to return an indictment against Detective Hankinson for 3 counts of wanton endangerment for wantonly placing the 3 individuals in apartment 3 in danger of serious physical injury or death. While there are 6 possible homicide charges under Kentucky law, these charges are not applicable to the facts before us, because our investigation showed, and the grand jury agreed, that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker. There will be celebrities, influencers, and activists who, having never lived in Kentucky, will try to tell us how to feel, suggesting they understand the facts of this case and that they know our community and the Commonwealth better than we do. But they don't. Let's not give in to their attempts to influence our thinking or capture our emotions. At the end of the day, it is up to us. We live here together. We work here and raise our families here together. I urge those protesting on the streets to remember this. Peaceful protests are your right as an American citizen. Instigating violence and destruction are not.
Dozens arrested after another night of unrest in Taylor's hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. Alex Perez is there on the ground for us, where the nighttime curfew just ended. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, good morning, Michael. This city is still very much on high alert. Things were relatively peaceful until nightfall, when we saw more clashes with police demanding justice for Breonna. Overnight, peaceful crowds marching through the streets in major cities across the country. Yet acts of violence ensuing in Los Angeles, 2 incidents involving vehicles. Watch this truck slam into a protester. Witnesses nearby attacking the driver before they speed away. And the news chopper capturing a dramatic chase after this white car drove through a group of people. A truck quickly pursuing the car and cutting it off, the situation escalating.
This is getting ugly really, really quick. Now you have protesters beating up that driver.
Police.
Apologies for that video again. Just technical difficulties, something always trying to keep us down. That's all it is. But when it comes to the Breonna Taylor case, I was immediately angered. I personally was angered. I was upset with what had happened. There was so much representation as well as underrepresentation that I just felt I did not agree with. I don't know if you guys are keeping up with it, but basically no officers were charged in the actual killing of Breonna Taylor, but the only charges that may be filed or called upon are gonna be for the neighbors that were involved involuntarily. So there's just so much meat on what happened around that and that tragedy going on with the officer Hankinson, who shot who everybody thought shot the most shots and did all this stuff or whatever, but apparently he didn't shoot the fatal shot. And they're just getting a lot of technicalities going on here, enough for them to just sit here and say, hey, this is why we're not going to charge anybody for the killing of Breonna Taylor, and they think that it is justified. So that is just a small summary. We already know Dr. Thomas is here, but now we have welcome Steve, huh? How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, go ahead, listen. Go ahead and talk. I know you got something to say.
Yeah. First of all, let's still go ahead and arrest the cop that killed Breonna Taylor.
Start there.
Let's start there. Not just arrest him, but convict him. And I hear you mention about the cop that actually shot the fatal shot. The person that shot the fatal shot wasn't Officer Hankinson, but it was Officer Crosgrove.
Yes.
Officer Crosgrove, he shot 16 times, I believe. Hankinson shot 10 times. Officer Matley shot 6 times. Now, last time I checked, first of all, they went over there for a no-search warrant, and there's only one person that could really say that, they actually did knock. And while there's 11 people that say, they didn't knock. And the person that actually said that they did knock wasn't even living on that floor.
Right.
While the other 11 who actually was living on that floor didn't hear nothing. And so about the charges, Officer Hankinson was charged not even for the murder, but he was charged on endangering the other apartment, and not even the murder. And I'm just trying to figure out, where will we find justice and when? Because if you don't know about the laws that is in Kentucky about stand your ground laws, no knock warrant, license to carry, why is it that they can stand their ground against us, but we can't stand our ground against them?
In your own home.
In our own home.
My God. Dr. Thomas, now you got to share a little bit more education. How you feel about this injustice matter right here?
So when I first watched and I saw that she had been murdered in her sleep, I thought this is not the first time that something like that has happened.
Not at all.
And I remember just thinking about the other type of cases where we have died in our sleep. And yet, while watching the verdict, I was perplexed but not surprised. Because I've learned this is the United States. And I'm black, and she was black. And when you're black and you live in the United States, you learn to expect injustice.
Wow.
And so when I watched him say that the officer was charged for hurting a building, for hurting a wall, but not for the death of a black woman who did nothing wrong but sleep. And last time I checked, sleep wasn't wrong.
Sleep wasn't the law.
Sleep is something that you need to be healthy.
I thought it was.
So I don't understand how a wall and an apartment became more important than a human life, other than the fact that this human life that was in question is a black one.
Go ahead, Steve.
And just to piggyback on what she said, just to wrap it up, the case had no body cams. It only had one witness, and they were going there on the premise of it having drugs in the house. There was no drugs found in the house, but there was a black body that was found dead. And if you haven't noticed, there were body cam footage that was finally released, but that body cam footage was about how Officer Officer Matley was shot. Now, apparently there wasn't body cam footage, but now there's body cam footage.
Right.
And so you know what? There's a lot more that I could say about this case, but I'm gonna just leave you just with this quote that I saw on a poster, was that I was born black and I will die black, but I don't want to die because I'm black.
Well, I'm gonna just say this last thing myself. I spoke with an officer about this, and this particular officer had been, doing this for several years, almost 30 years, and they even said that they don't understand this, and you know why? Because when you're going, first of all, they don't really serve warrants around that time, anyways. Normally, that's something you might still be out active at that time. More so like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., something like that, when they think you'll be there. That's first of all. The second thing is that normally you have special officers. They have special training. So when you go in somebody's house and you knowing it's the wee hours of the morning when people are sleeping for their health, right? Mm-hmm. They throw in flash bombs and different things to wake up the people, to wake them up, so that you can go in there and gather any evidence, so that you can get people. You don't want to go in there and just start spraying. You have to go in there to collect these people and arrest them and things. So there's so many things that's just not wrong. And then the whole body cams, how they weren't there and they are there. The discrepancies are building. It's literally building a wall of injustice right now. So I definitely don't agree with the verdict. I'm making it known. I don't think any of you guys do, right? No.
I definitely don't.
We definitely don't. Well, I just want to thank you all for watching this segment of Live at 5 today. I want to remind you again the impact of voting. Vote, vote, vote. I told you I was going to say it again. You should not be surprised. Go vote. And the best way to go do it is to go vote together. I made a post about that. If you don't know how to vote, then maybe you don't know where to vote. Well, you can go to vote.org and you can find voter registration deadlines in your own state. But if you are in this state and you are nearby, well, you can come to the I Am Change voting march. Again, you can go to this march with us. That is Friday, October 30th. You can find more information about that and register at j4tng.org. You can find more information. You can come vote with some people. You can get a whole group together, make it a party situation, whatever. Whatever it takes for you to be active, come do it. Okay? All right. We just wanted to let you guys know that we're very grateful for you guys viewing in. And I hope that you continue finding more education about what's going on today with Breonna Taylor, any other injustices, anything. This is a time to be educated. This is not a time not to know something. Tomorrow, we have church. We have church at 3 p.m. and we also are reminding you to help us with something, y'all. Help us with something. We like to do mega ministry here. We like to do it big and do it beautiful. That's what our pastor taught us. Help us to build this LED wall to enhance. Look at that beautiful visual. Look at that right there. Don't you wish you could watch some sports on that? Well, we trying to build it so we can watch Jesus. Amen. Hallelujah. Help us to build this wall. Partner with us, y'all. We still need a few more partners to knock this out. Y'all, this is good ground. Sow some seeds. Reap your harvest. This is the time to help us out with something else that's going to enlarge the kingdom. Again, tomorrow, we have church, 3 p.m. The anointing is strong. When my boys say 3 p.m., worship is strong. Give God praise. Thank him that you haven't got COVID and thank him for you still being here to even see COVID. You still here to even see it happening. You're part of history. So just come on and log on to here. Make sure you subscribe to Greg Drumwright TV on YouTube. You can follow him on Facebook and Instagram. We want to see you here so that you can plug in, so that you can be a part of the Citadel of Praise and Greg Drumwright, what he's doing next. He is out across the nation continuing to fight for the injustices and continue to be wherever God has him to be planted. Right? That was a mouthful, y'all. I got it all done. We thank you again for joining us today at Live at 5. We pray that you have a blessed day.
Slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction.
Had any idea that I'd ever be a slave again. I'd take a gun and just end it all right away.
And then they came back not too long ago. So they've been here back at the Capitol for probably about 30 minutes.
Put your hand behind your back. Agree. Get your hand behind your back. We don't put your hand behind your back when we begin. Please, for one. Please. Make the No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace.
Because ever since 401 years ago, the reason we could never be who we wanted and dreamed of being is you kept your knee on our neck.
I think our criminal justice system is working as intended. It is only broken to the extent that our society is broken.
2 years after the gang beating, this video shows Browder being slammed to the ground, his head smashed.
Dying and complaining about the problems, we want to stand up, because the other side of being done dying is knowing that when we fight, we win.
Breaking now at 11, outrage spilling into the streets. Fire set, 2 police officers shot as protesters in Louisville and around the country unleash their anger.
They're not interested in black lives. They're interested in props. A small number of blacks who were killed by police during conflict with police.
It's time for us to stand up in George's name and say, get your knee off our necks. But I'm more hopeful today than ever.
Our investigation found that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in their use of force after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker.